Hello, I'm so honored today to have this beautiful human being with me today. Hello, thank you for being here. Can you please tell me a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yes, my name is Sue Cartwright. I'm the founder of Prioritize Mental Health, and I'm the author of a book called From Despair. Oops, there you go, From Despair to Hope, which I'll talk about in a few moments as well, and I'll show you that again. Um, so yeah, um, over to you for a second.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was very short and it's okay too. And do you want to tell me a little bit about how did you, why you did write your book and how come you came in this road, in this path?
Absolutely, thank you for that. So yeah, I came into mental health from my own personal struggles. And I was always, it was always important to me that other people were able to relate to mental health. I was always afraid of mental health. I never used to share my mental health struggles with anybody. And like a lot of people, we kind of hide that out of shame and out of stigma, really, things that people have said to us or people say around mental health. So I grew up with probably very little foundations and very little boundaries in place. And I went on to kind of live a life that was hit by hurt, abuse, and despair, really. And so throughout my childhood, um, I can't say that my parents didn't love me because I'm sure that they loved me in their own way. But people show love in so many different ways. And for me, I I never felt I fitted in. I never felt I knew who I was. And I kind of struggled on a path. My mum and dad had struggles in their own relationship. And one day when my mum was planning on leaving my dad, and that was all good for me because I kind of suddenly felt there was a little bit of hope coming. But then they got back together, and that was quite a hard thing for me to cope with. They ultimately went on to separate, and they ultimately um, one day I turned up to home and was just told I had to find somewhere to live that night, and that kind of broke me. I didn't really know who I was, and I lost my confidence. I lost everything that was about me, really. I lost all my foundations in life. And I realized that I constantly battled with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. I always thought I needed just to get out of this world. My brain was just getting squashed and squashed and squashed. Until one day, I was in this place where I was just feeling lost and lonely in a dark, dark place. And I was battered by suicidal thoughts until one day I went on to attempt suicide. But obviously, the story didn't end there. And I came through that. And in order to cope with life, I ended up living life as two people. Thank you for that. I ended up living life as two people. One Sue that people saw, which was the happy Sue with the smile in her eyes, would do anything for anybody, but then would go home and would be the desperate Sue, crying and hurting. And I know that there are so many people out there who are in the same position, who are going to work, putting on this smile, desperate for people to see them, to hear them, but they don't know how to make that connection. And they go home behind closed doors, they're hurting, they're in pain, and they're either bottling it up until one day it will explode, which is what happened to me. One day it exploded and I had a breakdown. And that breakdown was the beginning of the best for me. It was the worst time of my life, but it was the best journey I ever went on. It was a journey of hope, it was a journey of empowerment. And it was a journey during that time. I realized that I will be using my experiences one day to help other people. And so that's where I wanted to journey through. And so the idea of the book came at that point. I didn't write it for many, many years later, but it was probably the first time I really wrote down a bit about my mental health and the journey at that time. I was no longer ashamed. I had some key people around me that were supporting me. It impacted my job, impacted all my relationships. Sadly, in with mental health, we can lose relationships, and I'm sure some of our viewers will have lost relationships because people don't understand mental health, and it really impacts people. So I lost relationships, but I also had some incredible supportive relationships. I had a brilliant counselor who helped me with lots of my childhood memories. Well, not childhood memories, but my childhood, probably the thoughts that I'd said about myself, that I was unlovable, that I was worthless, and I was of no value to anybody. And so those are my childhood memories, really, that not so much things that happened at home in a family, but the thoughts that I would say about myself. And so out of that birthed the book From Despair to Hope, which I mentioned about. Oops, there you go. So I deliberately put the words here: use me, abuse me, hurt me. But I wanted to cross them out because that's what happens to us. We can't take it away from us. You know, life happens, life sucks, and life is painful. And for so many people. But I wanted to say that our life doesn't need to stop there. Our life can go from here. I am empowered. And we can live a life of empowerment. We can live a life of hope. But sometimes we need to find those techniques. And so, in a few moments, I'll talk to you about a technique that I've used through my life there to live that hope and empowerment. So, that's really how the book came about.
Thank you so much. You're such a great inspirer. I'm really grateful to have you here and hear your story. And thank you for your trust and you want to share your story with us. So thank you. Can I ask what you do then daily to keep your mental health in check? I really want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I try to live my life in hope and empowerment, which is what I talk about in the book. And I use what's called an ARC model that I developed for myself, and I want to share with people and go much deeper at different stages. But in its simplistic form, the ARC model simply stands for acknowledge and accept, reach out to others, and commit to take action. Excuse me. So sometimes in our lives, we don't acknowledge that there's a problem there. We don't acknowledge that there's an issue with a relationship or with even our working life or even what we're doing in life. And it can be a real obstacle just to get to that level, to that acknowledge. And so I try to now acknowledge what's going on in my life. And once I can acknowledge, then I can start to accept it. And by accepting it, I can say, okay, I can't do anything about that. I'll just leave it there, park it. Or I can reach out and say, I'm going to do something about this. I am going to action it. So I can reach out. Maybe that's to a friend, maybe it's to a counselor or a therapist, maybe it's reaching within ourselves. Sometimes we have the sources and resources within us to reach within. And maybe it's reaching out to God, depending on what our values are and where our thoughts are, where our relationship is, etc., like that. It can be anything. We can reach out or reach within. And once we've worked out a little bit about what the situation is and we've reached out, we'll have some actions. And if we don't follow through on those actions, then we're just going to stay stagnant. But if we reach out, we can be empowered. And if we action those steps, we can live a much more empowered life. So let me share with you in just some very simplistic things. It can be for very deep level stuff, or it can be for very minute things. So when I came to writing the book, for example, I had a week that I really wanted to focus on the first bit of the book. During that week, my son and my husband were away, so I had that concentrated time. Monday came, nothing happened. I started to get low. Tuesday came, not a lot was happening. And I was seeing the week going away, and I thought, I can't do this. This is not right. And so I had to acknowledge what was happening. Monday had gone, Tuesday was about to go. And so I accepted that that's not what I wanted. I wanted to do something different. So I reached out to a friend and I just said, I now want to write this book. But I can't get my head in gear. I can't get motivated. I can't focus. And they didn't say anything specific. They just said, Sue, go take some time for yourself. And sometimes we forget that. We forget to take time for ourselves. We need that space. And they said go for a walk. Well, at the time I wasn't walking very well because I sometimes have problems with my legs. Having done a parachute jump years ago, it impacts me sometimes. And so this particular day, I thought, well, okay, I'll take some time. I'll have a nice hot bath and I'll take a book and read. And that book I read changed my life that day. And I got back to my desk, started writing and writing and writing, and I just continued writing. And so some simple things that sometimes we can do can change us. And let's take that into childhood really. All our lives we're starting to think about our childhood impacts us in our adulthood in so many different ways, in the way we think, in the way we react, in our relationships. And so as we move into different relationships, we might act differently to different people because they're impacting us on a relationship that happened in the past. And so once we start to realize that, we can start to acknowledge that to ourselves. And when we acknowledge that, we can accept that. We can say, okay, Joe Bloggs is behaving like that, and I'm reacting like this because of this situation. Now, I can either do something about it and reach out to somebody. I can get some help through counseling or therapy or my relationship with God, reading the Bible, or whatever it is for people, whatever that reaching out is. Or I could just leave it. But once I've spoken to somebody, once I've decided actually I want to move on that next level, I then need to action those steps. So I need to go much deeper. And sometimes maybe I need to go and ask for forgiveness for that person. Maybe I've reacted to them in a way that they thought, oh, why did she do that? Maybe they need to say sorry, but they don't necessarily know that they need to say sorry because that they're not at the same point in their own lives as well. So I kind of have had to just learn to accept those things in the ARC model. And so the ARC model is very much what I do to empower my own life and to live that life. And I have a relationship with God, which is also very real and to me and very valuable. So I commit everything to him as well. And at the end of the day as well, I'm very thankful for whatever it is I've achieved. And I try not to look too much at the negatives anymore. I used to be very negative focused about myself. I did a rubbish job at this or a rubbish job at that. But actually, I've had to learn that actually I showed up today and that's good, you know. And sometimes I don't know about you or about other people, but we live a life of perfectionism. We think everything has to be perfect. And I lived my life so much like that. And that beat me down with my depression and anxiety. And my boss at the time, when I had the breakdown, introduced me to something called the 80-20 rule. If I did something 80%, that was good enough. So let's learn to live our lives in the good enough regime rather than the perfectionism of 100%, which is so hard to live by. It's great if you can, but it doesn't matter if you can't, you know? So, yeah, I think it's kind of doing that, and I living in a life of forgiveness really also. I think it's really important to keep short accounts and to forgive ourselves first of all sometimes, and to forgive other people so much about that. It's also learning to love ourselves so often. I never knew how to love myself. I would let others do to me whatever they wanted, use me, abuse me, hurt me. That's fine. I felt I had this label on my head saying use me, abuse me, hurt me, do whatever, because that's my purpose in life. But my purpose in life now is to say, here I am empowered, and here I am to help you. Here I am to show you the importance of love and forgiveness, of building foundations, of building those boundaries in place, and having boundaries that protect not only me but protect other people too. And so that's really what it's all about for me.
Thank you so much to be this vulnerable and share your story with us. I'm really humble and grateful for you. Want to share so much of your story, and it's it will help so many out there. When I never know, and you never know, whenever someone maybe need this and hear your story and be so grateful for your voice, and you shared your story like this. So
Thank you.
I'm so grateful for you want to share this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And can you please tell me if you have done any inner child work?
I guess the inner child work for me is one, it's by my relationship with God, first and foremost, is changing the way I think about myself, and the words that God speaks over me, that I am lovable, that I am valuable. So often we don't think like that, and so I think the best counsel can come first of all from God, but also God gives us counselors, and God gives us therapists, and God gives us great relationships that can all impact our childhood thoughts and memories and help us challenge the things that are coming up in our minds at any given situation, as long as we're in a position to reach out and seek that help. If we decide to bottle it up, then that's okay, but ultimately it's going to damage us and it will come out. But once we're in a safe place, and it's important to be in a safe place, we can find so many relationships where people are not safe. And so we need to be able to know and trust the people that we share with. I think that's really important, particularly with childhood memories and things like that, because they're so precious to us, and that it impacts us and it shapes us. But we are shaped by our past, but we don't need to live our future by our past. So
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you. And it's kind of weird to ask if you have any advice, because you have said so many good advice but to now. But I really want to know if you have any advice for someone new in this journey. So I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think my advice is really to one, um, try and live your life in the ARC model of take it in its most simplistic form, first of all, and think about how can we accept what's going on with our lives today? How can we start to accept? So how can we acknowledge that? How can we start to accept it? And then let's look at, are we ready to move on to that next level? Are we ready to reach out? And then are we ready to commit to that action? So that's so much, so valuable to me, that I think is a valuable message to take out to people, that when we start to acknowledge and accept where we are, when we start to reach out or reach within, then we can commit and we can live our transformed lives. We can live empowered lives, and that can then start to radiate through to other people as well. So I think it's living that empowerment through the ARC model.
Thank you so much,
Thank,
Sue. I'm so grateful and honored to have you and share your wisdom and your heart and story with the rest of us.
thank,
So thank you for being here, and I would love to have you again one time. So thank
thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Take care. Bye.